What if the janitor in your office spoke 9 languages? Imagine the shock when the CEO overheard her speaking Mandarin, Spanish, and French like a native. This isn't your typical workplace story. It's a tale of hidden brilliance, unspoken potential, and a life that changed in the blink of an eye. Stick around to see how one woman's quiet talent flipped the script on everything. Subscribe and stay tuned for more inspiring stories like this. Jonathan Kellerman, the CEO of Halberg International, had never paid much attention to the cleaning crew. They were just a part of the background, quietly doing their job after hours, emptying trash cans, mopping the floors, and wiping down tables. He had always been preoccupied with his business, the ever-pressing demands of leading a global company. But that Monday morning, something shifted. It was as if the universe had conspired to interrupt his usual routine. The low hum of voices, the sound of shoes tapping against the tile, the buzz of phones all faded into the background as a sharp, familiar voice pierced through the noise. Mandarin. Fluent, clear, and articulate. He froze in his tracks. Mandarin. It wasn't the first time he had heard it in his building. He had spent years working with international teams in China, and the sound of Mandarin always brought him back to the bustling streets of Shanghai. But this time, it wasn't a fellow executive or a client. It was coming from someone unexpected, someone he had never even given a second thought to. He glanced around, trying to find the source, assuming maybe one of the sales reps had come in early. But no, it was a woman in a janitor's uniform, mopping the floor near the lobby directory. Her ponytail swayed as she gestured toward an older man, speaking to him in Mandarin, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Kellerman blinked, trying to process what he was hearing. A janitor, speaking Mandarin, fluent, effortlessly. His eyes narrowed. He had seen her before, of course. Denise Atwater, the woman who cleaned the building every night. She was always polite, always quiet, never making eye contact unless spoken to. He never thought much about her. Just another face in the crowd. But here she was, speaking to a stranger in a language most Americans couldn't even pronounce correctly. Curiosity clawed at him. He moved closer, trying to stay unnoticed, his eyes glued to the woman who was now wrapping up her conversation. In Mandarin, she turned toward the delivery man with a clipboard, and in an instant she switched to Spanish. Kellerman's heart skipped a beat. Spanish, now French, then Portuguese. Each language flowed effortlessly from her lips, her voice, calm, smooth, and confident. The realization hit him like a wave. This woman wasn't just cleaning floors. She was a linguistic genius, speaking 9 languages, and he had never even known her name. He couldn't stay silent any longer. Driven by a mix of awe and disbelief, Kellerman stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with curiosity. "Excuse me?" he called out, and Denise turned toward him, startled yet composed. She offered a polite smile. "Yes, sir?" "That was Mandarin, right?" he asked, his words slipping out before he could stop them. She nodded, her expression calm, as though it was nothing extraordinary. "Yes, sir." "And Spanish?" he pressed, his mind racing. She nodded again. "Yes, and French. Also Portuguese, German, Arabic, Italian, Swahili, and I read Latin, but I don't really count that." Kellerman blinked, his mind trying to wrap itself around the fact that the woman in front of him, someone he had barely noticed, spoke 9 languages fluently. She wasn't just a janitor. She was a walking United Nations. He was stunned. "You speak 9 languages?" "Yes, sir." There was no pride in her voice, no hint of arrogance, just a simple truth as straightforward as the way she had mopped the floors just moments before. She didn't care about impressing him. She wasn't looking for recognition. But Kellerman was shaken. His mind whirled as he struggled to process this revelation. This was no ordinary employee. She was brilliant, hidden in plain sight. Denise Atwater, the janitor, a woman who had been working quietly for years, never asking for anything, blending into the background as if she didn't matter. Kellerman stood there, rooted to the spot, the weight of his own assumptions pressing down on him. How many other people in his company had he overlooked? How many talents had he missed simply because they weren't wearing the right clothes or sitting in the right meetings? How had he failed to see this? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he managed to find his voice. "What's your name?" "Denise Atwater," she answered, her voice still calm, still grounded. "Miss Atwater, are you free for a few minutes?" he asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it. He wanted to understand. Her brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. "Now? Yes, I'd like to talk to you in my office." For the briefest moment, Denise's eyes flickered with something. Surprise? Fear? Or was it just a lifetime of being overlooked and underestimated? Whatever it was, she didn't show for long. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said softly. Kellerman pressed the elevator button, holding the door open for her. As they ascended toward his office, the air between them felt heavy. There were so many questions swirling in his mind, but he kept them to himself. Denise spoke first, her voice quiet, but her words sharp. "I've worked here for 13 years, she said, breaking the silence. "Never thought I'd be invited." "Up." Kellerman smiled, but there was a trace of something else in his eyes now. Something deeper, something more personal. "You might be surprised how quickly things can change," he said, though he had no idea just how much was about to change. Not for her, not for him, but for the entire company. The elevator dinged, signaling their arrival at the executive floor. Denise stepped out first, her shoes light against the polished wood floor. Kellerman's assistant, who had never seen her in this light, looked up at her in shock, but Kellerman simply nodded for her to let them through. Once inside his office, Denise sat down carefully across from him, folding her hands in her lap. Kellerman studied her for a moment. She didn't seem impressed by the opulence around her. She didn't fidget or look around in awe. She was just present. Finally, Kellerman spoke. "So, Denise, I have to ask, how does someone like you end up working here, cleaning floors?" For a second, Denise didn't answer. Her gaze moved toward the window, then back to him. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts before she spoke. And when she did, her voice was steady. No bitterness, no anger. Just the truth. "Life happened," she said simply. "I was on track to do something else. But then my mom got sick. My dad passed away. I had a baby. No money. No support. So I worked whatever I could. Find. Eventually, a custodial supervisor here offered me night hours. It let me pick up my daughter from school, pay the light bill. That's how I got here." Kellerman was silent, absorbing her words. The woman in front of him wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't asking for help. She had made it this far on her own, surviving, learning, growing. And in that moment, Kellerman realized something crucial. Denise Atwater wasn't just another employee. She was a force, quiet, unassuming, yet stronger than anyone he had ever met. As the weight of her words settled in, he couldn't shake the guilt that began to grow in his chest. He had seen her, not for who she truly was, but for who he thought she was. A janitor, a cleaner, invisible. And now, for the first time, he truly saw her, and he was about to make a decision that would change everything. As Denise stepped into the elevator with Jonathan Kellerman, her thoughts were far from the executive suite awaiting them. In the few minutes it took to ascend to the 18th floor, she replayed the conversation over and over in her head. She had been offered the chance to speak with the CEO, a man who had passed her by for the past 13 years, never once acknowledging her presence beyond her janitorial duties. But now, he wanted to speak to her. He wanted to listen to her. The question gnawed at her. Why now? Denise wasn't naive. She knew that in the corporate world, a woman from the cleaning crew wasn't supposed to be invited up to the top floor. People like her didn't get noticed unless they were doing something wrong, unless they had made a mistake. She had always kept her head down, her focus on her work, never asking for anything, never expecting recognition. But here she was, The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and as she stepped out, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of discomfort. The polished floors, the soft hum of the air conditioning, the faint scent of expensive leather and citrus in the air, it all felt too foreign, too distant from the world she knew. She adjusted the hem of her uniform, smoothing out the wrinkles. Nervously, before they even reached the office door, Denise could hear the murmur of voices inside. Kellerman's assistant glanced at her with a slight nod, a faint smile on her face, and Denise felt a shiver of unease run down her spine. She didn't belong here. Not really. It was all too easy to be invisible again. She didn't want to make a scene. She didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable, and yet, as Kellerman led her to his office, she found herself taking slow, deliberate steps, as if trying to convince herself that this was real. Inside the office, Jonathan Kellerman gestured for her to sit. The chair opposite him seemed to swallow her whole. Denise folded her hands in her lap, a simple gesture, but one that calmed her, a way to ground herself. She hadn't been asked to sit in a chair like this before. She hadn't been invited into these spaces. These were places for people who mattered. She wasn't sure she did, but Kellerman was different. His eyes weren't filled with pity or curiosity. He was genuinely interested, genuinely listening, and that scared her more than anything. He was treating her like she mattered. And what terrified her the most was that she might start to believe it. As he asked about her past, she told him the truth. She spoke of her life in Toledo, Ohio, of dreams that had slipped away when her mother got sick and her father had passed. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't ask for sympathy. She had learned long ago that life wasn't fair, and no one owed you anything. She had picked herself up, worked odd jobs, and never let anyone see how much she hurt inside. That was how you survived. That was how you kept going. She had learned to bury her feelings, to suppress the need for acknowledgement, because wanting something that couldn't be had only led to disappointment. Her heart ached when she thought about the years spent wondering if anyone saw her, if anyone cared. But now, here was Kellerman, asking for more of her story, and she found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone. The languages, her escape, her obsession. They were a way to keep herself connected to something more than the pain of her life. She borrowed textbooks, listened to recordings, read newspapers in foreign languages. Every word learned was a way to prove that she was still alive, still capable of something more. Denise glanced down at her hands, and for a moment, her mind flashed back to the long nights spent studying, her daughter asleep in the next room. The quiet loneliness she had lived with for years. No one ever asked about her life. No one ever saw her as more than the woman who cleaned the floors. It wasn't until Kellerman's voice interrupted her thoughts that she snapped back to the present. "Denise, I have to ask, how does someone like you end up working here cleaning floors?" His question was simple, but it hit her like a punch to the gut. Her stomach twisted. She hadn't expected him to ask that. She had always assumed her life story was irrelevant, that it was something she would have to carry alone, like a burden. She had never imagined that someone like Kellerman would care. For a brief second, she hesitated, unsure of what to say. Would he still see her as just a janitor after hearing the truth? She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Life happened," she said softly. "I was on track to do something else, but then my mom got sick. And after my dad died, I had a baby, no money, no partner who stuck around. So I did what I had to do. I worked whatever I could find, grocery stores, nursing homes, temp jobs, and when I got the chance to work here, I took it. It let me pick up my daughter from school, pay the light bill. It was something I could do." Kellerman was silent for a moment, taking in her words. But then his expression shifted. It was as though something clicked into place. He didn't look at her with pity or sympathy. He looked at her with respect. And that was something Denise hadn't seen in a long time. But as Kellerman leaned forward, he asked the question that had been lurking in the back of his mind. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you ask for help?" Denise swallowed hard. She didn't answer right away. She hadn't expected him to ask that, but it was the question that had haunted her for years. Why hadn't she asked for help? She had always been too proud, too determined to stand on her own. But in the quiet moments when the loneliness of it all pressed down on her chest, she had often wondered if anyone would ever see her. "I never needed help," she said quietly. "I just wanted to be seen for who I really am." And in that moment, Denise realized that Kellerman wasn't just offering her help. He was offering her something much more important: recognition. The kind of recognition that she had spent her whole life searching for. It wasn't a favor, it was an opportunity, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. But when she looked into Kellerman's eyes, she knew one thing for certain: this was her chance to finally be seen. Denise's heart was still racing as she sat in the sleek leather chair across from Jonathan Kellerman. His office was impeccably neat, too neat, almost sterile, and it contrasted sharply with the life she had just described. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, the soft hum of the air conditioning, and the polished wood desk made her feel small in a way that made her skin crawl. Every inch of her body screamed to run back to her familiar world, the janitorial closet, the late-night hours when no one noticed her. The world she had come from felt safe, even if it was suffocating at times. But now there was nowhere to hide. Not with Kellerman staring at her with that calculating gaze, waiting for her to say something more. He had asked her about her life, her struggles, her pain, and she had told him the truth. But now he was pressing her, challenging her to face something she wasn't ready for. "Denise," Kellerman began, his voice steady but with an edge she couldn't ignore. "I know it's not easy, but you're more than just a janitor. You've already proven that. I want to know, what do you want from this opportunity? What's your end goal?" Denise's mind went blank for a moment. What did she want? She had never allowed herself to think about it before. She had always just survived, never considered what would happen if things actually went her way. But now, as Kellerman's question hung in the air, she realized something that made her stomach churn. The truth was, she hadn't even imagined a life outside of this. She hadn't dared to dream. For so many years, the idea of climbing up, of being more than just the woman who scrubbed toilets and mopped floors, had seemed out of reach. For the longest time, she had convinced herself that it didn't matter. No one cared. No one ever asked her opinion. She was just there to do her job, to get the paycheck, to go home. But now, sitting in front of Kellerman, she could feel the weight of the possibilities. Could she really do this? Could she really leave behind the life of invisibility she had known for so long? It was a terrifying thought. "I don't know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never thought about it. I've been too busy just trying to get by." She felt her heart race in her chest as she stared at the desk, her fingers twisting in her lap. "I guess. I never thought I was worthy of more than this." Kellerman leaned forward, his eyes intense as he studied her face. For a moment, Denise thought he might say something comforting, something that would reassure her. But instead, he pressed on. "You're worthy of far more than you give yourself credit for, Denise. The languages you speak, the way you've handled every challenge life has thrown at you, it shows me that you have something special, something most people in this company don't even realize they need." His words hit her like a slap in the face. She was used to being invisible. She had spent years being just a face in the background, no one noticing her unless they needed something. No one ever thought to ask her about her dreams, her skills, her ambitions. And here was Kellerman, the CEO, talking to her as if she could be the key to something big. She could feel the pressure building inside her chest, like a balloon about to burst. She wanted to scream at him, tell him that it wasn't fair, that he didn't know what it was like to struggle every day just to keep your head above water. He had no idea what it was like to be ignored, to be underestimated, to be seen as nothing more than the person who cleans up after everyone else. But before she could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Kellerman glanced toward the doctor before calling out, "Come in." Denise looked up, trying to steady her breath as the door swung open. A young woman stepped inside, carrying a file in her hand. She glanced at Denise, her eyes flickering with confusion before turning back to Kellerman. "Mr. Kellerman," the woman began, her voice uncertain, "there's a problem with the vendor contracts for our Brazil expansion. The documents need urgent revision. She stopped mid-sentence as she caught sight of Denise sitting in the CEO's office. Denise could feel the woman's gaze on her, full of judgment, full of questions. What is she doing here? How did she get here? Kellerman didn't seem to notice the tension. He looked at the young woman and nodded. "I'll take care of it. You can go ahead and handle the other priorities for now." The woman hesitated, her eyes lingering on Denise before she turned and left, clearly uncomfortable. The door clicked shut, leaving an eerie silence between them. Denise's heart raced. She had seen that look before, the look that said, "You don't belong here." It wasn't just the young woman, it was everyone. She was an outsider in this world, and no matter how much Kellerman believed in her, she wasn't sure if she was ready for this. Kellerman must have noticed the change in her demeanor because his expression softened. "Don't let them make you feel small. This is your moment, Denise. You earned it." She shook her head slowly, her mind a blur. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "They're going to look at me like I don't belong. They won't take me seriously." He leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. "Let them look. Let them question. You've already proven yourself. You've already shown more determination than most people ever will. That's what matters, not their opinions, not their expectations, yours. Do you believe in yourself?" Her throat tightened. She didn't know how to answer. She wanted to believe him, but the years of being dismissed, of being told she didn't matter, weighed heavily on her. Could she really step into this new role and leave the janitor's closet behind? There was a moment of silence between them, and in that silence, something shifted. Denise realized that the fight wasn't just against the people who doubted her. It was against the part of herself that had never allowed her to dream, the part of her that had spent too long settling for what she had. She had spent so many years holding herself back, convincing herself that she didn't deserve better. But now, Kellerman's words hung in the air, and for the first time, she felt a spark of possibility. Maybe she was more than just the woman who mopped the floors. Maybe she was capable of more. Denise took a deep breath, the weight of her decision settling in her chest. "I'll do it," she said, her voice stronger now, filled with determination. "I'll take the chance. I won't back down." Kellerman smiled, a look of genuine pride crossing his face. "Good, because I'm not giving up on you, and I hope you don't give up on yourself either." As the conversation ended, Denise stepped out of his office, her mind swirling with 1,000 thoughts. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. She had taken the first step towards something bigger than herself. And no matter how many obstacles she faced, she wouldn't let anyone take that away from her. Not anymore. As weeks passed, Denise Atwater's life began to shift in ways she never imagined possible. The promotion to Cultural Liaison for International Affairs was just the start, but it was the beginning of something far greater than she could have ever dreamed. Kellerman's belief in her, and more importantly, her own newfound belief in herself, became the foundation for a transformation that rippled through not only her life, but the entire company. In the beginning, the transition wasn't easy. The whispers in the hallways grew louder. Some employees couldn't wrap their heads around the idea of a janitor suddenly walking into board meetings and negotiating contracts in fluent Arabic and Portuguese. There were subtle glances, raised eyebrows, and the occasional muttered comment. But Denise didn't back down. She showed up every day, determined to prove that she belonged, not because she needed to prove anything to anyone, but because she owed it to herself. At first, the change was subtle. It wasn't about the title, the office, or the salary. It was about the way Denise started to carry herself, confidence replacing the quiet, withdrawn woman who had once mopped floors in silence. She began speaking up in meetings, offering insights that surprised everyone. Her ability to bridge cultures and understand the nuances of language and behavior became an invaluable asset to the company. Slowly but surely, she earned the respect of those around her, not just because of her linguistic talents, but because of her unwavering commitment and her ability to solve problems others couldn't. But it wasn't just the work that changed her. It was how Denise began to see herself. She had spent so many years in the shadows, underestimating her worth, dismissing her dreams as out of reach. But now, she realized something she had never truly allowed herself to believe before. She was worthy of more. Her story became an inspiration to others in the company, especially those who had been quietly toiling away behind the scenes, doing jobs that no one else wanted to do, waiting for their moment to shine. Denise became a symbol of what could happen when people were given the chance to prove themselves. She worked closely with HR to help build a program that would identify and nurture internal talent, especially those who didn't fit the traditional mold. She knew that there were more people like her, hidden in plain sight, just waiting for the opportunity to step up, and she was determined to make sure they had that chance. Kellerman's faith in her didn't go unnoticed. As the company continued to expand globally, Denise's role became even more critical. Her fluency in multiple languages allowed her to negotiate with international clients and handle delicate situations with grace and expertise. It was clear to everyone that she was no longer just the janitor who spoke 9 languages. She was a key player in the company's global operations. And as her influence grew, so did the respect she had earned from her colleagues. Even those who had once questioned her promotion began to see her for what she truly was, a brilliant, capable leader. But Denise didn't forget where she came from. She often found herself walking past the janitorial closets, remembering the years she had spent scrubbing floors and wondering if anyone ever noticed her. She remembered the nights when she had to choose between paying the electric bill and buying food for her daughter, the feeling of hopelessness that had crept in when she thought about her future. But now, as she stood in the executive suite, she realized how far she had come. One afternoon, as she sat in her office, a knock came at the door. It was one of the young interns she had been mentoring. She smiled as the young woman walked in, her eyes bright with uncertainty. "Miss Atwater, I just wanted to thank you," the intern said nervously. "You've helped me so much. I never thought I'd get this far in the company, but you've shown me that it's possible. You've changed the way I see myself." Denise leaned back in her chair, her heart swelling with pride. She had seen this moment coming. She had seen the potential in this young woman, just like she had seen it in herself all those years ago. "You did the work," Denise said softly. "I just showed you what was already inside you." As the intern left, Denise sat back, reflecting on her journey. Her story was no longer just hers. It had become a beacon for others who had been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. It was proof that no matter where you started, no matter how many obstacles you faced, the right opportunities could change everything. But those opportunities wouldn't mean anything without the willingness to believe in yourself, to take that first step forward, and to never give up. Denise's life had changed, but so had the lives of those around her. She had broken down the barriers that had once defined her, proving that anyone could rise above their circumstances if given the chance. She had found her place, not just in the company, but in the world. And she wasn't going to stop now. As she stood up and walked to the window of her office, looking out over the city, she realized that she had become something she had never dared to dream of. She had become a leader, not because of her job title, not because of the languages she spoke, but because of the strength she had found within herself. And as she gazed out at the horizon, she knew that this was only the beginning. There were more people out there, people just like her, waiting for someone to see them, and she was ready to help them find their way. Denise Atwater wasn't just a janitor. She was proof that greatness doesn't come in a suit. It doesn't come with a title. It comes from within. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to see you for who you truly are to change everything.